Hi everyone, welcome back. I am super excited for our next session about dealing with depression on board with Hugo Ortega. Explore effective methods for recognizing and managing depression while working on a yacht. The session will cover coping strategies, support system, and ways to maintain well-being in a challenging and confined environment. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Hugo Ortega.
Hey, thanks for having me, Andrea. It's Hugo here.
Thank you for joining us. We actually have an exciting twist for you guys. I will be here filling in for Claire for a few minutes. This is what happens with live broadcasts. She's in Monaco, had a hotel issue, and well, here
Oh
we are.
no.
So, Hugo, let's start off with you introducing yourself a little bit and telling us what are your thoughts on mental health and basically why do you wanted to be in the session today.
Perfect. Thanks again for having me. So, for anyone that doesn't know, I'm Hugo. I run Superyacht Sunday School. I'm a career coach and also a former crew and captain on super yachts. So now I'm helping other people do exactly the same thing as I did for the past 9-10 years. And I'm very interested in mental health because it's something that I think a lot of our families, our friends, when they see us on Instagram, they see all the beautiful places we go to, the luxurious things that we do, and everyone thinks that, life is just dandy and it's great. And it is, right? Or else we wouldn't be there. But on top of that, there are a lot of challenges that come with the loneliness, the long hours, the physicality of the work. And it's good to talk about those things and also raise awareness because that's how we can, keep changing and improving the industry.
Thank you for leading us into the first section that I think it's what really affects us the most is the impacts of isolation. How does the physical isolation and the distance from your family and friends impact the mental health of yourself and the other crew members on board?
Right. So it's a very tricky thing because, like you said, you're tired after all these long hours of working, right? And you're far away from home. You don't get to just go sit on your sofa or go see your loved ones like on most jobs. Unless they're on board, you're really just confined to yourself and your cabins, maybe with one other person. You don't even have that space to be that, to feel those feelings. But yeah, for a lot of us, it affects us in different ways. But you start seeing things like a change in behaviors, sadness, anxiety. People very easy to irritate, very stressed out overall, feeling of overwhelm, um, you know, dismay, sadness, and it can lead up to full blown depression. There's a lot of negative and really dark feelings that can manifest in crew.
Is this something that you have seen personally, or you have seen in other people that you can help us understand what that actually looks like on board a yacht?
Definitely. So I can speak to both a little bit of first person and also third person as well. But let's say, even for me, especially the hardest thing on working on board is whenever you have, let's say, birthdays, Christmas, holidays, times that you're used to or you'd like to go spend it with, loved ones, people that you know. And with especially for me, my birthday being in July, one of the biggest things is that every year in the middle of the summer season, I'm here with a bunch of people of varying degrees how much I know them. Sometimes I'd be just starting out on a boat that season, right? So you have absolutely no rapport and no close relationship, right? Everyone's going to try their best. They'll bring you a cake, we sing, but a lot of times for me, especially, I was on charter, so it'd be really long hours that day on my birthday with people I don't know, away from my friends and family, with probably not enough time to get a really long phone call in or something that I'd like. So for me, those days especially, I'd feel quite blue. Really, you don't want to do anything. You feel just really isolated, withdrawn. You feel alone. Like everyone else is smiling and trying to pep you up, but it's just not where you want to be, right? And it's a very, very difficult time. Same thing with Christmas, right? If you're on charter, again, sometimes you have the luxury that you're busy, so you notice it less. But on other boats you're not working, right? For some reason or another, maybe the boat's in the shipyard, and again, having a slow work day, being around people you don't know, all the traditions and all those warm feelings, those memories of everything you used to do as a kid is completely different to where you are right now. And again, it's really, really easy to feel that alienation, that, oh, I don't feel like I belong. Do I really want to do this? Is it really worth it? Right? Is the money worth it? All those negative thoughts that later in the moment you can kind of piece together and think about. But in the moment, it's really, really hard.
And then if you want to layer on top, maybe you have all your crew and all your friends trying to lift your spirits. But what if that charter season you have very ungrateful clients, and you are thinking, I'm away from my family, and on top of everything, this is not the ideal situation that I wanted to replace, because you didn't choose to replace it. It's not like on your birthday you decided, oh, I'm not spending it with family, I'm doing a specific trip for it. This was out of your control. I've heard that a lot from people in the hospitality industry, not only on board crew, but especially chefs, because the busiest times are the holidays for them. So I completely understand that. Also, I am what is it, a Christmas baby? So December 27th, it's always like not. It's definitely I do not recommend. Um, so this is really hard, and obviously, especially the holidays, it's not like it happened once time. It's going to happen every year. You're isolated boat. You can't really change your birthday. You can't change the holidays. Obviously, charter season is one of the busiest times when it's Christmas time. But what lessons have you learned from your own experience, or anything that you have seen other people change in their behavior, or that you can recommend for those listening?
Definitely. There is a few different strategies that you can apply to trying to combat this. And for me, one of the best things and one of the simplest things I can say is just moving your body, right? For some people, that's running. For some people, that's yoga, some kind of cardio. Maybe it's just stretching in your cabin, right? Because you're so busy or you're on charter and you can only do, let's say, some body weight fitness stuff and doing some light stretching. But just moving your body 15, 30 minutes, it completely changes just your brain chemistry and how you're looking at situations, right? In the moment, you're full of dismay, you feel really upset. You start moving, and 30 minutes later, you have, the serotonin's kicking off in your brain, your adrenaline's flowing a little bit, and it's a lot easier to detach and think, okay, yeah, I'm a little bit sad, life's not that bad, X, Y, and Z. I'm going to approach the problem like this. Just having the ability to move your body, for me and all the crew member that I've seen that work really well with being apart from everyone else, they've maintained their hobbies, they've maintained their physical fitness, and those kind of things. It might sound like not a lot, but in an environment where we're working long hours, where we're far away from a lot of the comforts that we're used to, having that kind of routine is really, really helpful for me. Even also just meditation, in the mornings, even if it's just 15 minutes, again, that helps just center me. And then I'm thinking, okay, that problem that felt so big, or that mountain that was here, is actually a problem like this, right? And again, going back to trying to see the positive in your life at that point is a lot easier than when you're just like wallowing in that moment.
I love that you gave these amazing practical tools that we can all replicate. I'm not on board anymore, but I do travel a lot, and Claire Hagen is here, and she's going to jump in 1 second. But before that, when I travel a lot, you do become, especially when different time zones into different countries, as yacht crew do. It's not that they're just moving around close to home. Having a routine is so beneficial, because you get to have a control of your day, even if it's like a routine in the morning. So I'm so happy that you brought meditation and exercising, because they are part of the seminar. And today we're going to be doing a meditation session at the end. But let me bring in Claire Hagen, because she's now available again. So 1 second.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
Hey, Claire, welcome to my interview.
Thank you so much. I'm in Monaco, and there was some sort of evacuation. Nothing bad, but it was like a drill. So everyone evacuated the hotel just as this was starting. So thank you to Andrea for covering.
Do you want me to catch you up a little bit? We were talking a little bit about that alienation, why it happens on board, right? It's the long work hours. It's the physically being removed from our home countries, right? Which isn't typical for your 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And all of that, with all the stress of starting a new job, a new career, and all of that bottles together into people. And, it's very possible to spiral into things like depression, or just feeling really big anxiousness, change in personality shifts with all this sadness and all these other negative emotions that creep in, right? Even though we're in some of the hottest places, the most beautiful ships and all this, it's very possible that, it's the whole sad clown kind of thing, right? Like, make everyone happy on the outside, and on the inside, you're not feeling so great. So I was speaking about how, for me, one of the biggest things, and what I've noticed in other people as well, is trying to keep some kind of routine or normalcy compared to normal life, right? So I'm a big practitioner of, waking up even 15, 30 minutes early, trying to get a stretch in, trying to get some meditation in. I was mentioning how, for me, and studies show, when you get the blood flowing, when, that your brain kicks off that dopamine from starting to move, when the adrenaline's flowing, you tend to not be as susceptible to being sad, right? That's one of the first things they recommend to people that are going through depression, right? Get back into the gym, start moving their body 30 minutes a day, even if it's walking, right? Just anything, because that's going to help a lot. And then I was also mentioning the physicality, the stretching, and that for everyone that looks different, right? So maybe you're on charter, maybe you're underway, or maybe you're at the dock. For someone, it could be running. For someone else, it might be yoga. For someone else, it might be just some light stretching or some cardio, whatever it is. It's different for everyone, but just doing some kind of movement, just also trying to get in some of that like meditation. And if you have certain hobbies, right? I know we're really busy on board, but if you've always loved reading or you've always loved, sketching or writing 30 minutes is what you've known that helps you get through life, like not losing that when we get on board. Because on board, it's very easy to fall into the habit that there's so much that's demanding of you that you just kind of go, okay, it's just work and then to bed, right? And then you wake up and it's back to work and then to bed. And you wouldn't recommend that to an accountant. You wouldn't recommend that to a doctor. So same thing. At the end of the day, we're on a luxury toy, right? It's not life or death, even though it can feel that way.
Yeah, and I guess in like such long hours, and you're like also living with your colleagues. So even when you're technically off, you talk about work and like what's next, and it's super tough.
There's always another job on a yacht too. It never stops.
Always something. Yeah, always something to do. And in terms of recognizing it, like, obviously, owning up to part of like, okay, I think I'm getting depressed, like as part of, the solution to start. So what would you recommend? Is it just a bad day, or are you actually falling into something else? What would you recommend?
Right. Would you approach it from the perspective of looking inwards or like catching it in a colleague?
I think just looking at like, oh, okay, I'm feeling like this for a while now. Like, what's to change? Like how do you think there's triggers, or obviously different people, different things? But on board, is there a certain thing that you would give to tips about like, are you feeling like this? What would you recommend?
I know one of the things is that it looks quite different for everyone, right? Like even something like depression is a little bit difficult, but yes, this prolonged feeling of a lot of the traits that we talked about at the beginning, right? That prevailing like dismay, not wanting to get out of bed, feeling a lot of anxiety and stress around just everything in your life. Like you can't overcome it, right? It's starting to feel overwhelming. Again, those feelings of alienation and isolation, them getting deeper, right? I always tell people at the beginning, every boat's a shit boat, right? You get there for a month, you don't know anyone, you feel like, I want to go home, right? 3 months, maybe the same thing. Even 6 months, you're like, am I doing the right thing? But it starts to decrease, right? You start to feel more at home with these people. You start to realize that you have things in common, right? But like these prolonged feelings of separation, like you still don't fit in and longing for something else back home, whether it's family, loved ones. If that's something that's becomes commonplace and doesn't seem to be getting better, but in fact is getting worse, right? And it's then starting to affect other aspects of your life, I think that's when you have to start realizing, like you said, it's not a bad day. It's not even a bad charter. It's something more, right? And the next step is going to start affecting your work, right? It's going to start affecting your relationships with everyone. So I guess the first step, I would say, you feel poor, like try to zoom out and think, is it, like you said, is it a today thing? Is it this charter thing? Or, this season's been really tough? Or is it, oh no, it's just everything, is caving in.
And so in terms of like, obviously captains, a lot of captains watching this, is it like training and resources and ways that like, obviously there's a lot of managing parts of the boat. So what would you advise them when they're seeing obviously their crew, obviously, feeling depressed? Like how can they help? Like what are the tips and training resources that people can, introduce on board?
Right. So unfortunately, I think right now the industry, well, it's kind of like in a shift. Like there's not that many industry resources that everyone's aware of or even knows of, right? Like in terms of management, it's not like they're saying you have a health policy that includes seeing a therapist for X amount of time, or we have an on-demand psychologist that can talk to crew. So a lot of it is kind of DIY or looking online to learn more about this, which is unfortunate. But I do think, seminars like this and a lot of the movements that are going on are improving that. But as leaders, like you said, as captains, that's one of the main things we need to be able to do is to lead people and understand. And it's hard because I know there's a lot of other moving parts, moving the boat, the owner's coming, all these things that a lot of times, even for the captain, they lose track of what's going on with the crew, unfortunately, if it gets big enough. So that I think then at that point, the same thing applies, but to HODs. But being able to really have an interest in people, right? The people that we're working with aren't just units that you plug and play into a different cog. They're people, right? They're very unique. We all have stories. We're all from all kinds of crazy different parts of the world. So having interpersonal relationships as a crew, aside from our work, is really important. So then you have a vested interest in going, man, Fred's an awesome deckhand. He's always been great, but this season or this month or even this week, like there's something wrong with how he is. I can see he's not acting the same way. He's not talking in the crew mess now. He's not going to the gym like he used to. And those are all things that you can only notice if you're actually spending time with these people, right? If you don't have time with them, if you don't have any rapport, you're not going to notice their behavior changing. So I think in terms of like recognizing it is one of the hardest struggles that a lot of us are going to face, when applying it to our crew, because of the fact that we haven't had training in this, right? I've done all kinds of officer and captain trainings. We talked a little bit at one point about how the human element can affect our decisions on board, but really I'm not formally trained in any meaningful psychology aside from some general eds that I took in college. So there does need to be more education on this. I think from my perspective, there is a shortage for sure, and it would be a lot of reading up outside of yachting to try to learn more about this and then incorporate that into your leadership style.
Do you think it's a responsibility of like some of the yacht management and the crew agencies, like to offer like additional support for their captains and crew, like whether it's like you said, like online seminars like this, or like helpful guides that the crew network and other crew companies are sending? I mean, what would you think on that? Would they be responsive, or I don't know, is that something maybe we could implement?
It's an interesting question for sure to ask, because legally we know that they're not looking out for that because they're not required to, right? There's not an IMO legislation that's saying, hey, you need to make sure that the happiness meter's at 70% for your ship. So they're not looking out for it. But ethically, of course, I think I try to imagine it compared back to, let's say, like a Fortune 500 company. If you hired a consulting agency to come in and look at how that business runs, they're not just going to look at the accounting, which is what management companies do, and then look and go, okay, everything seems like it's not on fire, so it's cool. No, they do a deep analysis on who are the people that you're hiring. How are they getting along? They do interviews with people to see, how do you feel at work? Are you valued? Are you able to progress? Like, there'd be a lot going into it. And I'm not saying that we have to go to that extreme already, but even things like implementing for the agencies or for the management companies, sending even a questionnaire to the crew every 6 months. Hey, how are things? How's it been since I last placed you and I made a few $1,000s off you, right? What's going on there? And maybe people can reply anonymously, right? And again, in a forum where you feel like you're not going to be a whistleblower, if management is now going to process it and go, okay, they're not going to say Claire said this, but they're maybe going to go, okay, over the last 12 months, it looks like in the interior department, there's a lot of feelings of isolation. There's some bullying that's been going on. Someone's feeling like they're not being cherished or made to feel valuable. Okay, like we can see this trend has gone down actually in satisfaction for the past 2 reviews. Let's get the captain involved and tell him, hey, let's have a meeting with the chief stew, but something's going on there. I don't know who, and it's not about who, but there's a problem and there's a sentiment that's getting worse. And that's just a small example, but you would do it in a company. Why wouldn't you do it with a $150 million asset that maybe has 20, 30 crew? And I think that's the nature of this. The industry is getting so big with these big yachts that we kind of have to think how to relate them back to things on land, right? When you have 30 people on board, there's a lot that goes into HR at that point. It's not just a startup anymore, right? It's a full-blown business.
Yeah. And like you said, these larger yachts is 40, 50, 70 crew. And we've got a question from the Clever Traveler. How have you managed staying connected from afar? It's a good question,
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. One of the main things for me, and I know it sounds quite obvious, but just keeping regular contact with the people that you're trying to stay in contact with family. Maybe like you've set a routine, like, oh, call mom, once a week, and that's a go-to. I work with crew members that actually do it every day. But again, sometimes you're so busy, for me especially, but at the end of the day, making sure I take like those last 15, 20 minutes, maybe that's when I call my partner, or we have a little bit of texting back and forth. Of course, it's not the same as in normal life, but just setting that routine and going, oh yeah, I can't wait, I'm gonna have that call later tonight. Or again, maybe in the reverse, waking up early and calling my mom, just, oh, this is what's going on. But setting that routine, because if you keep saying, oh, I'll do it on my next break, I'll do it on my next shift, like it just spirals out and you're like, holy shit, it's been a month. And I've fallen victim to that too.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
trying to keep a routine for me is a lot easier than just sending it whenever you're free. Because then when you're never really free, and then you feel guilty, and yeah, that's how that goes.
Yeah, no, especially also with the new generation, like obviously communication's different as well. A lot of people don't like to talk on the phone, so like keeping that WhatsApp or at least some connection is, really important, and setting a routine.
And for me, oh, sorry, I was just going to say too, for me, I'm really big on like voice notes, or what we call like asynchronous conversation. Sometimes you can't have a conversation for 15 minutes straight, but I've got 3 minutes. I'm going to send a voice note. Maybe my girlfriend will hear it later, and then she'll send me something 7 minutes later, whatever. And even if it's long, then after the ship, I can look forward to hearing like a quick 5-minute message. And especially with the voice built in, to me, that's really, really critical. And that's how I keep in contact with most people. It's mostly WhatsApp voice notes. On occasion, I'll use text, but I think that's really, really big. It gives you almost the same warmth as having a FaceTime, right? Like seeing their face, but it's a lot more practical because you can do it while you're moving the tender or doing something else.
No, especially with the time zones as well. Like obviously, that's a really good tip. Okay. And then in terms of just obviously in general, if someone can implement something like right now, in terms of like just like quick thing, like I know you've gone over a lot of tips, but just like, okay, 10 minutes, this is what you prioritize. What would you say?
If it was just 10 minutes, I think I think if what studies will show, I probably, let's say it's 15 minutes. And then I say like, stretch and do yoga for like 10 minutes and then meditate for 5 at the end, for sure. Doing a combination of those two alone. I think they say if the first 15 minutes you invest into that kind of mindfulness, you immediately get back that night at sleep, right? They say you fall on average 15 minutes faster to fall asleep. So you're kind of not even net losing anything. But I think if I was to start there, starting with that and then analyzing, okay, is there other physical activity that does excite me? What can I do to get the blood flowing and start sweating?
Yeah. And if there's any, closing statement, big wise words that you could give, what would it be?
I would say, look, at the end of the day, this job, it's super, super taxing at times. It can be super stressful. There's so much going on. There's different people telling you to do different things. The hierarchy sometimes feels like it goes up and you can't see over it. But at the end of the day, we're yachting, we're taking care of someone's toy, right? Something that they probably don't even think of 50% of their life. It might be 100%. You might be so tunnel vision that that's all you can see, but that owner probably doesn't even think about this thing even a quarter of the time. So if even the person that owns it isn't thinking about it that much, like really try to step back and just, I'm not saying the job isn't important. I'm not saying that what you're doing isn't important, but just zoom out and try to have that second perspective and go, okay, yeah, there is more to this. Even for my life, there's more to this. I have a family. I've got maybe a home. I've got other projects. This isn't it. This isn't the all end all be all. So just really try to keep perspective. And I think that'll help a lot.
And we've got another question. Can you share your routine? I'm guessing you're saying the 15-minute routine or more tips later on. How can we follow you? And I probably missed it. How can we engage with you and keep?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll answer Beat Library's question quick. So again, like I said, wake up. I like to do maybe 10 minutes. Okay, there's 2 questions. So how do you quickly back into your routine when work disrupts it? Easy to fall off the wagon. Yeah. So for me, I'm taking this from the perspective of, let's say I'm almost on like a live aboard type situation where I've got a really long charter season, right? Usually I have a set schedule. Let's say I'm lead hand or something. I'm working the 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. or something with some breaks and lunches thrown in there, right? But I know, okay, I'm starting at 5. So that means I'll probably wake up maybe 4:15 or a little bit before 4:30, try to do 5 to 10 minutes of meditation, try to do at least 10 to 15 minutes of yoga. So I probably underestimated on time. Let's say 4:15. Do that. Then change, start the shift, go through the shift, right? During the day, I'm firing on all cylinders. I'm working, right? I'm besides throwing some food in my stomach, there's probably not a lot of dead time, or at least dead time to do practices like this. I would probably then at night, again, let's say I clock off at 8, maybe, talk a little bit, 15 minutes with my girlfriend. I like to put my feet up on the wall because you're standing so much. It kind of brings the blood flow back down and it helps. I found it just helps them not feel as sore. I can't remember exactly the science behind it, but I know, like, kind of to put perspective, like your feet straight against the wall and then you're just sitting, laying back. I find that's really good, again, to just kind of center, and also just the physicality of resting my legs. And then sometimes you can even do a little bit of like night yoga, right? I even go on YouTube sometimes and find a little flow that'll help you then go to sleep. And if you're taking it out of the perspective of yachting, probably including an hour or half an hour of some kind of physical activity in there. But like you said, it's easy to fall off the wagon. And I remember there's a really good, quote from Jerry Seinfeld. They say, how do you write so many jokes? Right? Like, you have this insane university catalog of jokes. Like, how did you get to that point? And he said he literally just writes one joke a day. He says he goes to the calendar and he just marks with a big red X when he says one. When he writes one. And pretty soon he says, you don't want to break the chain because you're seeing it. You're saying, okay, I've done this that many times. And we've probably all heard this. If you see it on your calendar, if you see something, but really, if you see something, and especially if you can see that you haven't broken a cycle, you're that much more in tune with doing it. It's a lot. It's in your head. Oh, okay, I went to the gym 2 times this week. But start putting X's next to each other, or start having some kind of physical cue. And again, you won't want to break it again. And if you do, start from scratch and go again. And then you asked me where you can find me. So Super Yacht Sunday School, we're on Instagram. We're also on Facebook. You can find me there. You can find me, Hugo.Ortega at superyachtsundayschool.com if you want to shoot an email, or freesuperyachttraining.com if you want to see our free training. And probably everyone already here is a super yachty, so it doesn't matter. But that's where you can find me.
Amazing. We've actually got more time, which is great.
Okay,
I
perfect.
didn't realize how much time had already passed while I was getting evacuated from Monaco. So that's amazing. So we've got more questions. So do you think go on.
No, you go on. You're probably
do you think there's major difference in mental health issues depending on the age in the industry, from kids that first left home and their first job to be a seasoned captain?
I think so. I think there is a difference, and it's always, I wouldn't say some is more intense or less intense. It just changes with life, right? When I remember, for me, it wasn't when I first left home, because I had already, it's not when I first entered yachting, but it was when I first left home, right? My first Christmas away while I was traveling. That's when I was like, oh, wow, like this is how it feels when you're so far from home. You feel like an alien or a stranger in a strange land, that kind of feeling. But let's say, fast forwarding to then, I'm dating someone, right? Me and my girlfriend, we've been together almost 5 years now, but we started dating at the beginning of COVID. We were both on different yachts, right? So that was extremely lonely in terms of just you with society, but then in terms of your partner is also in a completely different area. So I wouldn't say that was more or less intense, but again, it was a very different feeling now. Now I was feeling it from the romantic interest as well, not so much just family. And then, if you keep zooming forward, then you'd have a captain. Maybe they have a wife and kids, which arguably at this point, a partner and kids, because it can be man or woman, right? Yeah. But I guess I'm going from the perspective, I've met so many men that fit into this stereotype, but they've got a family back home, right? And then now they're battling with the feeling that their kids are growing up without them, or that their partner is raising them alone. And there's a lot of guilt in it. I think this one's probably, now that I think about it, is going to be the most intense. But again, it's just different. At each point, you're susceptible to being depressed. At each point, it feels like the worst thing. So, unfortunately, I guess it might get easier with time to cope with loneliness, but then you have your own struggles that come across all these peaks in our life, like you're saying, that even a seasoned captain at that point, they might struggle with this too.
Yeah, and going back to your other point that I really loved about, the accountability, sort of like this crossing off on the calendar, these things. And I guess, maybe in terms of, the crew mess or something, maybe there's a joint calendar and everyone's a bit accountable, like everyone's done their X on the calendar, or like everyone's got a different color pen or something. I mean, I just think also, like, as you said, like, for me, it's, the kids left home to first job, everyone's different points, but everyone can do that 10-15 minutes as well, at any age. So maybe like if oh, hang on, Trevor hasn't done his. I saw his cross isn't there on the calendar. That could be quite a cool, because I think obviously being crew on board, you're all in it together, literally.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that would work really well, because it reminds me, I was working on a 90 meter back at the beginning of my career, and we would set like our records in, using the rowing machine or the cycling machine or whatever weight you did. We had a little list, and you'd put down your record, and then everyone's trying to beat it, right? So everyone's working out again more on top of that. And then, everyone's asking, oh, did you go to the gym today? Oh, did you do that today? So I can see it working very similar like that. Especially deck crew tend to be very competitive as well. So you'll have someone going, oh, I did mine 3 times today just because.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. And in general, like, so like we're talking about obviously, the whole kids and managing connectivity and stuff. Is there any other advice for someone like a captain who's got obviously that pressure, how they kind of communicate more or how they can check in better?
So you're saying how they can better check in with their crew?
Yeah, because obviously from the crew side and from his kids, his family, like, is there any key advice you could give?
I would say on the crew point, definitely just, like you said, checking in. One of the things that's so hard in yachting is that, we talk about all these things, a 3-month review, 6-month review, 1-year review. If I could tell you how many reviews I had, I'd probably struggle to fill one hand, right? So maybe we start there, like actually having a regular reviewer, and maybe it's not even a formal one. Maybe you have a formal one once a year, but having like that 6-month checkup, like, how has it been being on my ship? Like, tell me from your perspective, what do you see that's going well? What do you see that's going poor? Like, maybe we could have roundtable discussions like that, where you don't feel the pressure that like it's, oh, I'm bad mouthing you. No, I'm just saying this is where I'm seeing it's not doing so hot. Maybe even having, an anonymous box where you can actually put suggestions, right? Like, again, there's all these things that work in regular life. I think you could probably adapt some kind of, maybe one thing at a time, right? You don't want to be too kitschy, but you can apply to yachting as well. And in terms of the family side, like you were saying, just, again, scheduling. I know it sounds silly, but even when you mark on your own calendar, if you put something in Google Calendar, it's going to ping your phone. You're going to pick it up and see, even if it doesn't have a meeting or anything, and it just says call mom or, text wife or whatever it is. You see that, you're going to stop, and you can choose not to do it, but you're going to be that much more likely to do it because it's kind of encroached into your life. So I think setting up things like that will set us up for success. Yeah,
for sure. I think everyone should do something like that now. Everyone who's listening can put some sort of notifications, check in with, where's their crew? Oh, this table is wobbly. I think setting that notification and doing it now, like if everyone takes the time and just goes like, who can I check in right now? Set a notification next week. It takes 2 weeks. I think it's a good habit to have. Okay, we have another question. Happy early birthday. Is it your birthday? I missed that.
Oh, it is. Well done. Yeah, my birthday's in 3 days. That's awesome that someone knew. Thanks, Facebook.
And then how are you dealing with special holidays on board? I mean, considering the industry, that's a good point. New Year's Eve and all these special holidays, that's great celebration for everyone else. So you want to be on your yacht is obviously, the crew. What can you, recommend?
Right. So for starters, right now I'm not on board. So I work full time on land doing, this company and helping people. But I'll take it back to the perspective of when I was full time on as crew. Right. Again, Christmas is always a really difficult one. I guess it depends. For one, you have to look at, are you on charter or are you not? Because sometimes when you're on charter, it's a blessing because you're so busy that you don't have time to think about it except the morning of the night. And again, that's when I would say, for me, it was about calling home or calling those loved ones. So I'd do it at both ends, like the bookend of my day. Start off on a high, on a positive, and then end also on one. And just try not to, during the day, try not to think about it too much. But the problem more so is when you're slow. right? When it is your birthday and you don't have a charter, or when it is Christmas and for some reason the boat's on the hard and you couldn't go back because they could only send so many crew back, insert whatever scenario.
Yeah.
And I've found that in those times, almost trying to bring some kind of tradition back. Like I'm really big on making eggnog. I like doing that. So
Oh, nice.
maybe at some point in that season, making an effort to do that, right? Like making a little special tradition. We've done photo shoots where like we all have Santa hats and we're on the bow and things like that. Like trying to bring some kind of celebration or make some kind of crew tradition is really, really big. Even the stews, just changing the placemats and the napkins to being like festive, and the chef puts in some kind of effort on actually making a nice spread. And again, the crew trying to fill in. I've done Secret Santas while we're underway, right? I've done a lot of different activities like that. Maybe what's the one where you steal the gifts from each other? Is that Dirty Christmas?
Oh God, I think that might be an American thing.
Yeah, that might be an American one. But I've also done that on charter, right? Even though it only maybe took 20, 25 minutes, making sure we had coverage in some way while the rest of the crew got to do something like that. Creating those little micro moments, at least then you can look back and go, okay, it was hard. It's not like being at home, but I made a cool memory. I got closer to everyone I work with. All that's really, really positive.
Yeah. And talking also like, with the special occasions, I guess like, actually moving Christmas Day, like, and creating your own Christmas Day is what you're saying, really. Like, it could be, having your own crew Christmas Day when you are off.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't have to be on the physical day. I've had where the owner's coming on Christmas, so we did it on Eve, which in other cultures still is fine anyway. But it could be on Boxing Day. It could be a week later. Who cares?
Do you think there should be like a nominated person that's kind of, I mean, I guess some people would probably like nominate themselves. Like you have committees in companies where it's a social committee in previous companies. I mean, maybe as a crew, having someone like say, look, you're our seasonal girl or guy, you organize this, and that's part of, or the captain, says there's a social committee. I don't know. Because that happens in corporate world. So maybe having someone to make sure someone's responsible of making sure these things happen.
I like that idea. It kind of reminds me, I don't know if you're familiar with The Office, how they had the party planning committee.
Yeah.
I could see something like that working. Yeah. And the captain can give a budget for like whatever it is. Well, I think that's already usually happens in terms of crew deco or crew alcohol or whatever. But I think that could work. I've worked with several self-proclaimed crew morale officers, so I guess those would be the personalities and the people that you would be looking towards. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have a few of those on crew, and that's always really nice because then they're always willing to, they're always trying to be the center of the party or create some kind of event. So that might also go back into the hiring process, right? Maybe in terms of the interviewing or something, that's something that we're looking for, right? I remember on my second yacht, the captain told me he hired me as the personality hire, right? So that could be, again, similar thing. You're looking for that one person who can kind of be an X factor for certain things.
Yeah. And we have another question. Do you have any tips on dealing with feelings of grief when being on board with no physical connection to your loved ones? Grieving for a loss can feel overwhelming. The loss can be from a present experience or former experience is triggered somehow.
Yeah, that one's especially difficult. I haven't gone through, knock on something like intense grief or anything like that yet. I haven't had a loved one that was lost. But from what I've seen, I had a chief stew on one of my yachts that lost her father at the beginning of a charter. And from what I saw, one of the biggest things and best things you can probably do is to leave if that's physically possible, right? Yeah. Sometimes they can't get someone in or you don't want to, or you don't have a place to go back to now. Like I know there's a lot of different scenarios, but that would be my first thing, right? She couldn't cope with it. And I saw that it was just really, really negative affecting her. And I spoke with her and I said, look, we can get you home. Like, let's just do that. And that was what she ended up doing. But for some people, if you can't do that, it's hard because I feel like you need time to go through all of those different emotions. A lot of those, for some people, it's really ugly, right? And you don't want to be around other people. And for other people, they just keep it inside. And then I feel like they can't properly move on. But I know everyone can't just extricate themselves from the situation. So if so, maybe it would be having a really honest conversation with the captain, maybe just trying to get some time back, even if it's like half a day, or is there like a way that you can call, okay, I'm at this point. I can't. Can we make amends for the rest of this
Yeah.
shift or something? And trying to get some alone time and some space to deal with what you're going through, because it's really serious. And I think yachting isn't always the most friendliest place to be going through intense emotional problems, because it's just so minimal in the amount of resources we have, like the amount of extra time, the amount of extra space, that I think that would be my strongest suggestion. If you could, to extricate, or just be honest and upfront with your HOD or the captain, be like, look, this is what I'm going through, this is what's happening, or maybe I'm not going to go into that much detail, but I might need time or might need something at some point, and seeing if they're willing to work with you. Okay, we'll go a man down for the next day or whatever.
And, in like you were going, bringing it back to like the corporate world, you would have a day where you get it off for grief. And so, I mean, maybe there's something within that, at least, this becomes normal, like, having, personal day and introduced into yachting. And I think, do you think that it brings it back to like the yacht management and the crew agencies and the other external things that are obviously dictate what the crew do, and from a charter perspective, or, scheduling really, and like having that time?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying. I think that would be an excellent thing to put into practice, and I think we're moving in that direction, right? It's hard because yachting is one thing that yachting is. It's far from being standard, right? You can be on one yacht where if you say, I think I'm sick, and you have to work anyway, and why are you trying to get off, right? And you can have on a boat that you go, hey, I'm feeling ill, and they go, hey, we got a car, we'll send you to the doctor right away, we'll take care of that, right? It's like such a vast difference. So I can say, kind of like on the moral high ground, we need to get to here, and this is what we need to do. But there's a lot of training that just needs to go on psychologically, because sometimes people say, the owner doesn't want to pay for this, or the management doesn't want this, but who really doesn't want it is the captain, or who really doesn't want it is the old boys and girls that don't want to change. Are they going, why do people need mental health now anyway, right? There's still so much of that mentality that people just need to grow out of. So I hope everyone can kind of keep moving forward with that, so we can kind of phase those people out. And then we do have a more enlightened crowd that's like, if my corporate job at the bank is willing to give me a day for grief, then surely someone who owns that bank should also give me a day for grief. Yeah, for sure. And I think also it comes back to, age as well. Like, so I know that a lot of the older generation had the very British thing to say, the stiffer upper lip, is like, you've got to just carry on mentality. I'm not saying it comes from the war. Well, it kind of does, but, but I think it's also that. And like, I think this generation and, even mine as a millennial, we've become a bit more open with being like, it's okay not to be okay. You just have to talk about it. Don't just bottle it up. So I think, that like opening up as well, that generationally, like some people do bottle it in, and because they've been taught from back then, like this stiff upper lip sort of mentality. So I think also from the personal day thing, bringing it back to corporate, I really like the idea of having a personal day. I think that should be maybe something we all lobby, because if as you say with crew, maybe you don't want to talk to your colleagues about grief or the breakup because it's too personal, and you don't want everyone to know your business because you've got to work with them the next day. So saying, like, I just have to have a personal day is why corporate companies now say you don't have to give us a reason. You can keep that to yourself. You just say, look, I can't tell you what's going on, but I want a personal day. So I think, that could be a great thing in yachting, because you're closer than ever to these people, because you stay in the same quarters as them. You're like live, really, eat, sleep, work, everything.
So I think having like, a note with the grief thing, having some sort of day introduced to the yachting calendar that you have a certain amount of days a year that you can just say, you know what, I just don't feel like it today, and I need that personal day and that guarantee.
Yeah, 100%. I see there's a question below saying about crew training. Is it giving the real picture? No. In regards to how prepared new crew are, or do they make it seem like a below a deck episode in order to churn and burn?
Oh God, it's below deck.
It's a difficult question, because in terms of mental health, I'm going to take it just wide, right?
Yeah.
I think, no, a lot of people don't have the full picture. And unfortunately, a lot of people are just judging it off a TV show. And I'm not going to say names, but there's a ton of schools, especially a lot in South Africa, that are just telling everyone, hey, come do it. It's the best thing in the world. And just come give me, like $5,000 a head and hang out with me for a month. And I'm going to take you 0 to hero and you're going to be completely ready. And it's a lie. It's an open-faced lie. And a lot of people don't know what they're getting into, right? Like, look, I've been in the industry for almost 10 years. And look, it's hard. It's physical work. I enjoyed it. I love it. It's not for everyone, 100%. There's a lot of people that don't want to work long hours. There's a lot of people that never been away from home. There's a lot of people that have never cleaned, that have never done anything, have never humbled themselves in certain ways. There's a lot to it. Is it worth it? Yeah, of course, or I wouldn't have done it. But we need to be more realistic with telling people for sure what they can expect, and just getting people to be more aware of even topics like this, right? I think the hardest parts about yachting, and I once had a chief officer tell me this. He said, the reason we get paid all the money that we get paid isn't because the charters are long. It's not even because the charters are hard. He said, we get paid the money we do because we're away from family, friends, and we have to deal all year round when the owner's gone, when the kids are gone, when everyone's back at home. You're still there working hours on that boat with people that aren't your best friend. Maybe they're not even great friends. They're from different places. Maybe they even speak a different language than you. And that's the part that most people can't handle. They can't, it's too much. And having some kind of training, maybe to bring people aware to that cultural difference, to the loneliness, to the negative feelings. I think that's something that's a far cry from any of the training or even any of the briefings or interactions that we're doing with people at this moment.
Yeah. And touching on actually nationality, I didn't even think about that. Like, because obviously you have so many nationalities on board and different ways they've been brought up. And, I know I'm typically British. I don't speak any other language. Like, what advice would you give, like kind of trying to communicate with your colleagues better? And like, because if they're struggling, it's maybe harder to communicate as well on board. Like, is there any advice you can give? Like, very multinational crew,
I would say for what works for me is I mean, it's also a bias, but it's also sometimes easier to speak about emotions or things that are really, really intense with someone that speaks the same language as you, just because a lot of that was formed when you were a kid, right? The sadness, the joy, all those things are sometimes associated with your parents or with your upbringing or something like that. So I find that I usually try to find a confidant. For me, that would be in Spanish, right? So I usually have some kind of Spanish crew member nearby that I can share that extra bit really to kind of get through things or get past things, but not everyone has that, right? Maybe if you're from South Africa, you've got all the people in the world that can listen. You've got a whole choir, but for some of us, maybe we're from a really particular part of the world and we can't express ourselves. And I think at that point, trying to still have a best friend or someone that's really close to you on the crew, maybe they're not your best friend in normal life, but someone that you trust more than the rest, just that you can kind of not vent, but just unload to, be a little bit more vulnerable to. That's going to be really, really big. And if you can't have that, then again, just phoning home, I think, or phoning a friend or whoever's in that language or culture that's going to understand your problem.
Yeah. And we have another, it says, by the way, I was just onward without having negative consequences. I think that was back to the grief question.
Yes. Yeah. So you probably, unfortunately, with some boats, you're right. You would just lose your job, right? If you told them, hey, I can't handle this right now. I can't cope. Best case, I'd be hoping for a boat that would give you some kind of time.
Yeah.
But if they're super busy, they might just say, hey, you didn't lose your job, but here's a plane ticket. We'll see you later. And like you said, in other ones, it is going to be a plane ticket home. And that's the unfortunate stance of where the industry is at the moment. And I think the best thing to just think about it is, hey, if they couldn't do that for you, then they're probably not a boat you wanted to work for.
Yeah.
And if there's more boats for sure, and there's like 20,000 yachts out there, so you can find another one. I know it's easy to say, and again, there's so much complexity in this question, but if we boil it down, if they can't meet the needs that you have, and it's for your mental health to go somewhere else, and your job's at risk, I would say follow your health and then go back for another job.
Yeah. And in terms of if you are feeling that isolated and, you can't, obviously you're scared about losing your job. Obviously that means, no money, you don't know where you're going, you don't know where your next job is. I guess, do you think the industry in general, obviously we're talking about this and this is great setup and this is what this is for, but, back to owner, captain, the stakeholders, education about giving that leeway, everything doesn't need to be so tight, and like if that guy goes down, like we're screwed, you know? Does there need to be some sort of, I don't know, some sort of company that steps in that is, I don't know, and if that's, you know, like the emergency crew, like come in, temps, I don't know. Do you think there's a solution, or is there a company out there, you know, right now, apart from the crew agencies that
And
gives
that's
temp crew?
apart from the agencies. No, that is a hole in the industry. I like what you said about having a specific kind of niche where you're trying to fill in for people that have these problems, right? That
Mm,
emotional distress or whatever. Like if you could partner a company with all the recruitment agencies, hey, if you hear that this happens, like use us. That could be really,
yeah.
really interesting. But like you said, yes, it requires educating the stakeholders, right? Because even let's say to take it to a concept, it's similar to rotation, right? Where you give people more
Yeah.
time off, and in turn you have to pay more money to have the same amount of crew, technically, right? In a way,
Mhm.
because the owner doesn't feel that there's more crew, but there are, and that he's losing more, he or she is losing more money. So I think you have to educate the owners, because from their perspective, you're kind of trying to tell someone to stop loving money, right? Or start hating it, because
Yeah.
you're going to basically say, hey, we're going to lose this much in man hours, and you're going to also have to pay this much more money in psychological welfare or whatever. Are you ready to sign up? And they're going to say, hell no. But like what we do in corporate is you start showing studies or doing studies that show, hey,
Mhm.
we're losing so much money in
Yeah.
efficiency and in how people are performing, and it's costing the boat this because we're having so much churn because people are
Yeah.
in distress and they're leaving. And you start breaking it down, and it's a little bit of extrapolation, but if you can turn it into dollars and cents and tell someone, not having
Absolutely.
these policies costs you this, having these
Yeah.
policies will break even or maybe cost a little more, but you'll keep more retention, your kids will be happier. Or the golden crown would be, oh, you're also going to save money if you do this.
Yeah.
But I think we need to start doing some research into things like that, because that's, once we convince them, everything else will follow. But right now it's me from the crew perspective shouting upwards saying, hey,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need this. And the next level is like, yeah, we don't care. We don't have the money for that. And the conversation stops there. So
Yeah.
it requires a governmental boards and a lot of awareness with, again, like events
Mhm.
like these, to try to change the tides and start having a better industry.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also I really like, you know, the idea that there's some sort of, I don't know, because I always think of the school system where you get, like in England, it's Ofcom. So they say like that school rating's this. And I think the moment someone comes in with a Glassdoor review of certain yachts, I know that like there's that yacht shaming group, which I kind of
Yeah.
follow, and I'm not in yachting. And then the crew side. But I know from a marketing perspective, obviously, we always talk at the brokerage house about great crew. There's always great crew. It's a fantastic crew. And we're always talking about the reviews from previous charter guests. So if there was something that was like, oh, it's a verified, like
Hmm.
independent source for a rating, and then you want to chase that rating because then you can charge more for the charter side, maybe. And that means looking
Yeah.
after the crew because then they'll do a better job. So maybe there's
That's a
something.
really good point. Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, we just got to get the third person on this call is going to be a really good lawyer, and we'll start breaking down with an NDA
Yeah.
what we can and can't say, because I know this is what scares most people, right? Most people don't
Mhm.
want to say anything because they've signed away, or they think they've signed away the rights to say. But we do need some kind of information can be brought out for sure, and say this yacht has a 1 out of 5 in safety. This yacht's a 1 out of 5
Yeah.
in drills. This yacht doesn't do this. There's so much that needs to be under scrutiny, because the
Yeah.
problem is we have too many cowboys, too many small boats that are doing all kinds of shit, taking in
Mhm.
people that are completely green, almost predatory like, um,
Yeah. So
almost what is it when you, well, almost gaslighting them into thinking
yeah.
they're crazy. You're so lucky to be on this boat. You can just go to that Facebook group, Yachty's Name and Shame, and you can see like a
Yeah.
lot of the just preposterous, toxic stuff that
Crazy.
comes
It's
out.
crazy.
Like if you want to feel depressed on board, go into your cabin and read Yachty's Name and Shame, and then you're
Yeah.
really gonna have a good time.
Yeah, I joined it actually because it was an awareness for some of the clients I have of the roster of yachts that we're marketing. Because I also have a responsibility not to say in an Instagram post or a thing, oh, this yacht is amazing, da da da, in a way. And it's also to tell the client, like, look, there's clearly a couple of issues, and we can't
Mm,
keep claiming this has a great crew experience when there's clearly a couple of issues, you know. And I'm glad that there's an anonymous thing around that group because, like pointed out, NDAs and things. And the more, voices we give to crew, the more obviously the industry has to move in a better direction as well.
Right. The knowledge is power in that instance.
Yeah. So now knowing the mental health tolls working on yachts can have, would you have done something to be better prepared before taking a job? That's a question.
That's a great question. So for me, one of the biggest things after my first few knockabouts and seeing how different yachts run and how it was being on board is asking as much questions as I can at the beginning to try to get a more fuller picture. And that sounds kind of obvious, but really asking questions. Like for me, it's important to try to figure out how much is this boat used, right? If they're saying they charter, okay, last year, what were the numbers? If the owner's on there a lot, what are we talking? Live aboard? We talking 3 months in the summer? We talking 2 weeks in the summer? What how long was my last predecessor on board for? Trying to figure out, okay, they left in 3 months. How long was the predecessor before that? Oh, okay. What are your expectations then for the bosun, right? Let me listen to see if something's weird because people keep leaving and it sounds like the boss is there a shit ton. So like trying to get more and more of an idea. What do the crew like to do? Well, everyone goes home or this and this and this. Okay, so it's a boat based in Florida now that everyone has their own house. I'm not going to be hanging out with people. It sounds like, like really just trying to ask enough questions to get an idea. Like how many crew do we have? How, what are the nationalities on board? How much is the usage? Again, a little bit of intrapersonal stuff mixed with a lot of just figuring out the situation is because sometimes I know for crew and myself in particular, even you feel like when you ask too many questions, I'm going to turn them off. They're not going to want to hire me or I'm going to look like I'm too difficult. But hey, you're going to hang up that phone and have to go to the airport, fly to a different country, get onto that boat and hope to God that it's a good one. Because if not, now you got to get on a plane and go somewhere else. It's a really, really involved, almost you're marrying yourself to this job way more than anyone else would. And I know for a fact that if it was a corporate job, I'd be asking a good amount of questions too. So I have to naturally be asking more or I'm being silly.
Yeah. And do you think from a job advertising perspective, it's a really good point you made that there should be more detail in them. Like, I think obviously they're not going to tell you if the last guy lasted 3 months, but like, in terms of communication, like, is this yacht, mostly Italian and I'm going to be the only one that's like, doesn't speak Italian? Or am I, is there a more of an awareness on, what, who's on the boat? What am I going to be part-time stew as well as a deckhand? I'm going to this, so maybe it's a detail that should be added to job description. Do you think like adding more? Do you think there's enough description added to the current job descriptions?
For one, job descriptions in this industry are far again from standard, right? I've seen 2 lines that say need deckhand, $200 ASAP, and they don't even remember to put where the boat is or even the contact info. And I've seen other ones that, is a good lengthy few paragraphs. So I think overall we have a huge way to go in the amount of information that we're giving because again, like I was saying, it's such an involved thing to say, yes, I will be crew, because then when that person hears yes, they're also now their expectation is, well, Hugo's going to be here for at least 12 months. And how can you expect me to do that if you also didn't even give me anything? Like, people complain about crew longevity. People complain about what young people in the industry are saying now, but they're not also looking back and going, who the hell would make that informed decision? Like I've gotten on interviews with people who don't even remember who I am or what we've talked about. And I'm like, if you can't even run this interview, how can you run a boat? So it's difficult. We really do need to educate. And again, I keep saying educate, and it's hard who's doing the educating, but we need to educate people at the top on how to communicate things like this outside of the boat, because we do need more information. And I think it would be beneficial to everyone, to green crew, experienced crew. Like, there's nothing worse than hopping on a boat that you thought you were going to be there for 2 years. And then you get there and you look at the logbook. I've had this and I see predecessor left in 6 months, before him 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. And then I get there and then I'm spending time with the captain. And then I'm like, oh, right. It's that.
Yeah.
It's the micromanaging and the not trust and the spazziness and all this stuff. And I guess that wouldn't be easy to capture in a job listing. That probably falls back more to me to being a better interviewee. But again, there's so many things where this happens, where we don't have enough information at the beginning and we can't make the most informed decision and then throw in the loneliness and all the other stuff,
Yeah.
and suddenly it's a recipe for disaster.
And also from that point, do you think there should be a template that people can follow? Because obviously if you're down on crew, you're probably, this isn't your, like obviously it's a priority to get new crew, but you're writing this job ad, probably maybe it's not even through an agency. You know, you're a captain under stress because you're a lack of crew and that's why you're hiring. So you're kind of rushed to create these job posts. So maybe there's maybe a template that's for the industry to download or something hosted somewhere, because I think maybe they can't, you know, if you're under pressure, like I can't even think that I don't even need to put the location, because I've been on that and I'm like, oh God, I didn't even put the salary because I'm like, so, you know, under pressure, it's like a part of a job. So maybe there's some sort of industry standard template, be like, look, this would be ideal, like, because this is what people need to know.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I hadn't even thought about that till you said that, but you're right.
Yeah.
That's a huge
Downloadable.
opportunity. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you can plug and play with whatever information you want, but just even like a quick checklist for you to remember the
Yeah.
essentials. Yeah, because that's a huge thing. And
Yeah.
I think it's funny because we put so much emphasis on how good is your CV for a crew coming in, right? And we think, oh well, if your CV is not that great, then surely you didn't put in enough
Yeah.
effort, and you don't really want this job. Meanwhile, I need crew, and I'm not putting in any effort into the
No.
listing that I'm putting out. So it's like you have to do, what is it? Do not as you see, but not as I do, but as I say.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
kind of a bit of a catch-22 at that point.
Absolutely. It's like, do I put a photo on? Do I put my socials on? I've seen these articles or recommending what crew do to their CVs, and there's nothing about job posting and, like, you know, what is the ideal job ad? Okay, maybe we can get someone to write that who's listening. Next question. Just recently, we see the companies that are offering criminal record checks. That's a good point. But is it still far from the norm? How does that affect your confidence on board when you're not even sure that the people you're working with out at sea with no escape, are you safe? That is a good point.
Yeah, that is a really great point. Seeing as how I've worked with, well, I've worked on boats that I couldn't confirm or not, but that, you know, it was known that certain crew members had maybe some really negative history with the law. Like I've worked with, again, I didn't know, but, you know, people that have come out of like dealing drugs or like murders. I've heard of crazy stuff on board.
Wow.
But one of the most important factors is just safety for the rest of the crew, right? There was a few years ago, there was incident of a stewardess that was, you know, she assault, and I think there was a rape charge as well, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that I think the most important thing is to make crew feel safe, and you want to be able to know that when, you know, the lights go down and that boat's floating who knows where, that everyone does have their wits about them. And I do think that that would be something that should fall under the management company, whether it's, they also do psychological tests. We can rope that into being able to check on people's mental health once a year, or who knows, or when they're hired, and then a year later, right, to be able to tell what's changed. And then maybe it is, you know, doing also as well some kind of background check or history. Again, that's the problem, right? We're kind of starting at zero, and we're looking at so many things. We do need to start having the impetus and the onus on these companies to at least be checking who they're sticking onto the yachts.
Yeah,
so I think the concept is great. I know there's a little bit of trick in the execution since it's worldwide and since there's different you know, flagged yachts and so many things, but I think it is good.
Yeah, and I also think, I mean, for what I've seen from my experience, there's a lot of companies that say they're going to check this and they're creating all of these incentives, but then it's just a money thing, and it's not like, it's just to charge yacht companies money, you know, so everyone's skeptical. I mean, you know, I used to work for Fraser Yachts. We'd get a lot of people pitching to us, and we'd be like, okay, and then, you know, we'd be like, actually, this is just a money scheme to get us to do, like, install something or put something to our crew. But I think like, you know, maybe it's an industry-wide thing that all the, you know, the builders to the designers to the brokerage houses have to give to something independent. So it's more about the quality of, like you said, like having these surveys done, or and it's so independent because actually they as being a yacht company in the industry, it may be something MEBA can do, you know, because they have a responsibility, you know, their charter and the crew is obviously like what 80% of the experience on a charter. Maybe it's something they can be like, look, you know, we need these things, and like someone needs to do it, because obviously every brokerage house is under pressure at the moment, you know, time poor inside. So giving them an extra job, I can assume that's what's stopping the evolution of adding some of these great incentives,
Yeah.
and the crew and the captain are under pressure. So maybe it needs to come from an independent thing, you know, that
Right.
is not doing it for commercial reasons, but doing it for like actually making the industry generally better.
Right. And thanks, Johnny, for that comment. It's been really good chat so far, really good conversations on the topic. And I know I don't want to take the floor from you, but they said last call for questions. So if anyone wants to ask
Yes.
one more question,
Yeah.
go ahead, throw it up there. We'll try to tackle it.
Yeah, definitely. Last call. Yeah, I just think, yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely going to start lobbying people now that I know my clients. I'm going to be like, oh God, Claire attended some crew conference and now I've got to put all these things in place.
Right. It's like they were saying before, the risk of losing your job for speaking out, right?
Yeah, no, and you know, at the end of the day, this industry will not evolve with the new generation of charter guests, new owners. They're, you know, much more aware of their emotions. They're much more, you know, they've got different, you know, whether it's sustainability, everything, you know, so they want to feel like their crew is being looked after, and you know, we have moved on as a society, so they've got things got to change, you know, and there's more charter yachts in the water than ever before, and it's only gonna, you know, the rich get
Only going to
richer.
keep going up.
It's only gonna go up. I think I saw there's like 400 or 500,000 ultra high net worths in the world, and they expect by 2025 there's going to be another 200,000 added. Not that they all
Wow.
charter, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, you know, like it's, you know, there's 700 billionaires in the US currently.
Yeah. Well, we can all just end up becoming yacht crew then. We'll just have maybe 6 times as many yachts floating around, and the whole world could be on yachts.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly obviously the industry is growing and growing, and charter and crew is obviously a huge part of that. So we've got to get better. So is there any more questions? Do you see?
No, I don't think so. I think they were just saying it's probably time for us to call it curtains.
Yes. Right. Well, remind everyone how we can find you, follow you, and also someone asked for your routine. So definitely share, and yeah. So remind us again. Go.
Oh, perfect. Well, thanks so much, Claire. It's been great to be here. It's great to be. I've almost said great to be aboard. It's great to be here. If anyone wants to follow me, Super Yacht Sunday School, we've got a website, superyachtsundayschool.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook as well. Just shoot me a DM. I reply to every email message, so I'll be there. Yeah, definitely. And in terms of routine, a little bit what I alluded to before. Really big on like a little bit of meditation and yoga in the morning. If anyone's interested, there's a book called Deep Work, and it talks heavily about how you need to block your time and protect it. So you're kind of before the world touches me and before I get on all these technologically advanced things, you know, if I need to do writing or I need to do a lot of my serious working and thinking, I'll go into that stretch. And then closer to the middle point of the day, you know, after like 2 hours, then I like to go and do exercise, right? Whether that's a little bit of cardio, some HIIT, then, you know, have a lunch, proceed to go into like another deep working session, right? Taking little micro breaks between, but working straight through. And, you know, then unwinding after that. And then at the end of the day, just going maybe another physical activity, maybe go for a walk, things like that, really. And then at the end of the day, winding down again with meditation if I can.
Amazing. Hugo, you've been amazing. You've definitely inspired me to go and do at least 5 or 6 of these things and start lobbying people that I know.
Perfect. It's been great. It's been great chatting with you. It's been some really, really good conversations, and I hope everyone gets a lot out of it. I know I did.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're on mute. At least you're on mute to me.
Thank you, guys. This was an amazing session. Thank you both for your time, and Claire Hagen for making it out of after being evacuated out of a hotel in Monaco for April. Everyone, we're going to take a short break, a 2-minute break to stretch your legs, and then we will continue with body shaming on board.
Amazing. See you all.